This screencast is to support this lesson on question tags for checking. It's a lesson about charities and sport, and starts off with some speaking, some discussion, listening, a focus on the grammar and some practice. The lesson is taken from Straightforward Intermediate by P. Kerr, Kerr, and C. Jones, published by Macmillan. So this first part is getting the students thinking about the topic of charity, raising money, and so we could start off with perhaps some questions to the students, asking whether they've ever raised any money for charity or given any money to charity and what it was. And then they can do this speaking activity here, where they work in small groups or as a whole group, looking at the three different ideas to raise money. And then while they're looking here, they can be answering the questions. So for example, a tennis match between the Wimbledon champion and the president of your country. How much would you pay for a ticket to watch the match? So there are questions with each of the situations. Then they need to do some group work. So they're going to look at three different charities in three different groups, and they are going to then tell their classmates about their charity. So it says in the student unit that these are on page 129 to 132. So let's have a look at those now. So there are two ways of doing this activity. You can either put them into three groups and give them one of the charities each to look at, or you can give each group the name of the charity, a different charity, British Wheelchair Sports Foundation, Fair and Sports Aid, and say, I'm going to give you 8 minutes or 10 minutes to research online these charities. So they can look online and find out as much information as possible about the charities. Next, you'll need to regroup the students into A's, B's and C's, and then they can do this question 3. Imagine that your group works for the National Lottery and you have £100,000 that you can give to the sports charities in exercise 2, so the ones that each group has researched. And you can either give all the money to one charity or divide it between several charities. Decide as a group what you will do with the money. So you've got someone from A, someone from B and someone from C in a group together now. So they can first of all tell each other about their charities, and then they can decide as a group how they're going to divide up this £100,000, where they're going to donate it. When they've done that, you can bring them all back together as a group and they can tell the rest of the class their decisions, explaining their reasons. Okay, so next they're going to do some listening and answer some questions. So before they do the listening, we're going to need to pre-teach some vocabulary, some tricky vocabulary that comes up and that will be useful for them to know. So the words I've selected are sponsor someone and sponsorship, make a donation, make a mess of something, and to be a bit short of cash. So these are all words and phrases that come up in the audio. So perhaps get them to match these words and phrases with their meaning, and ask some concept checking questions to make sure they really understand them clearly, and do any drilling of any tricky words and phrases. Then the listening needs some context. So it's about a guy called Dan who's going to do a cycle ride from London to Brighton to raise money for charity. So you could show them a photo of a man with a bike and say, this is my friend Dan, or this is a guy called Dan. What do you think he's going to do? And, you know, based on the context of the lesson, try to elicit that he's going to do a cycle ride for charity. And then they can have a look at the 3 questions from exercise 1. Just have a read of the sentences, and while they're listening, they will need to decide if these sentences are true or false, and correct the false sentences. So give them the 3 questions, tell them they're going to listen to Dan talking about his cycle ride. Don't tell them at this stage where, because that's in the first question. And then play the audio. While they're listening, they answer the questions. Then after they've listened, they can peer check their answers together, compare answers, and then get some feedback, making sure that they can see the answers. Same procedure for exercise 2, different exercise. Listen to the dialogues again, and in which dialogue 1 to 5 does someone do these things? Okay, so there are 8 questions. Give them a minute or so to read through the questions before they listen. Play the audio. They answer while they're listening. Then they peer check. Then get some feedback. Again, making sure that they can see the answers on the slide. Next, there's a vocabulary exercise on make and do, which is always useful for students because it's something they find difficult. I'm not sure you'll have time to do it, but you could have it as an if time activity, and I certainly wouldn't get them to look in the audio scripts because that takes too long. But if you do have any time at the end of your allocated time, you could just get them to talk together and decide, do we make a cup of tea or do a cup of tea? Do we make some work or do some work? And just put M and D next to the words and expressions. Now we come to the main language aim of the lesson, which is question tags used for checking. So we use these a lot in English, and we use them when we're seeking confirmation of something. Now the examples given here do not relate to the audio. That was a great film, wasn't it? It's time to go, isn't it? You can't speak Japanese, can you? So what I'd like to do is replace these sentences with sentences from the audio. So over here in exercise 2, we can pinch some of these sentences to introduce the target language, okay? So instead of that was a great film, wasn't it? We can use number 1. We can use first names, can't we? Okay. And instead of it's time to go, isn't it? We can use it's about the photocopying machine again, isn't it? And for a negative, instead of you can't speak Japanese, can you? We can use number 3. You're not taking any time off work for this, are you? Okay, so just use these 3 sentences over in the initial language focus stage, and then we won't use the rest of these because there's another activity to practice later. So in the book, they are telling the students all the information they need about the meaning and the form and the pronunciation down here. But what we'd like to do is get the students to work it out for themselves. So remember, we always check meaning first. So use a question tag after a sentence to check information that you think is true. Instead of telling the students that, can we change that into a concept checking question? You know, why do we use question tags? What's the reason? See if the students can tell you. Okay. Are we looking for confirmation? Yes, we are. Do we want to know if something is true? Yes, we do. Okay. And then you can focus on form. So remember that we've replaced these 3 sentences. Okay. So here as our example, we can use first names, can't we? Then instead of it's time to go, isn't it? We're using it's about the photocopying machine again, isn't it? Okay, same thing, positive sentence with a negative tag, okay. And here, instead of the Japanese sentence, we've got, you're not taking any time off work this week, are you? So we've got a negative sentence with a positive tag. So instead of giving the students this, telling them about the form, let's take out some of the information so that they can talk together and decide what goes in the gap. So we could say use a blank tag after a positive main verb. So they look at the sentence, you can see that is a positive in this part of the sentence. Therefore, the question tag is the same verb, same auxiliary verb, but we change it to a negative form. Okay, so they can write negative in here and then use a blank tag after a negative main verb. Here's our negative verb, can't, okay, and then that's negative. So over here, whoop, we change into can, okay, which becomes positive, so they can write positive in the gap. You can look at the language reference here to get your head around the rules of question tags. So they've focused on the meaning because you've asked some concept checking questions. They've worked out the form. They've thought about what form the verbs take in the sentence to make question tags. So next they need to practice pronunciation. So the key here with question tags for checking is that the intonation falls on the tag, okay? So it's easy, isn't it? It's easy, isn't it? You're not busy, are you? You're not busy, are you? Etc. Okay? So drill some sentences. You can either choose to drill these. Remember, don't show them the sentences, just get them to focus on you and listen and repeat. Really thinking about the intonation and how it falls on the tag. And if you want some extra sentences to drill, you can do some of these from the audio that we haven't looked at already. So not 1, 2 and 3, but you can choose any of the ones between 4 and 8 to drill if you prefer to do those from the audio. Next, they need to do some controlled practice. So they need to have a go at using the correct question tag in a sentence. The book asks them to match a phrase in column A with a question tag from column B. I would make this more challenging and not give them column B and just get them to write the question tag in perhaps a gap that you've left in the sentence so that they can look back at the rules, think about what they need to do and write their own. It just makes it more challenging. Good idea is always to have the rules that you've covered earlier visible to them so they can refer back to them while they're doing the exercise. If they're doing it individually, get them to peer check afterwards and get some answers, okay? Monitor carefully what they've been doing and pick up on any difficulties in feedback. Now for some freer speaking. So we want them to practice using these question tags with each other. So I would put the students in small groups and instead of writing, I would get them to just say things to each other that they think are true about each other and get them to confirm or not. So before you put them into small groups, set this up clearly with a clear demo. So use a student. You're from Spain, aren't you, Julio? And what will he reply, everyone? Yes. Is yes enough or do I need a little bit more? Yes, I am. Good, very good. Then get them speaking in their groups. Monitor carefully for good examples and errors of question tags. And then bring them all back together for some feedback and do some post-fluency correction afterwards.